Los Angeles, 1995. The city was buzzing with the usual summer heat, the hum of car engines, the chatter of shoppers flooding through the sprawling corridors of the Glendale Mall. It was a place of bright lights, endless storefronts, and the smells of popcorn and pretzels wafting through the air. For 3-year-old Daniel White, it was a wonderland, a world full of colors, sounds, and possibilities, where every step could lead to a new discovery. Daniel's small hand was tightly clasped in his mother's as they navigated past rows of gleaming toys and sparkling displays. His eyes darted excitedly at the shelves stacked with action figures and dolls, but what caught his attention most was the toy kiosk right in the heart of the mall. It was a cluttered little stand, draped with banners advertising the latest battery-powered cars and stuffed animals. "Just a quick look, Daniel." His mother, Karen, smiled down at him. She was cautious, but today felt ordinary. Nothing suggested that this afternoon would mark a fracture in their lives forever. But toddlers have minds of their own. In a blink, Daniel's fingers slipped from Karen's grasp. The noise of the crowd, the laughter echoing from the food court, distracted her for only a moment, just enough time for her to realize he was gone. "Daniel?" Her voice rose, barely above a whisper at first, then cracked as panic took hold. She scanned the crowd frantically, pushing past startled shoppers. "Daniel!" The word echoed, but no answer came. Security guards were alerted. The mall's public address system buzzed with announcements. Karen's heart pounded, each beat a painful reminder of her helplessness. Hours stretched into days, days into weeks. Every search turned up nothing. No witnesses came forward. No clues were found. The media swarmed the story, the missing toddler who vanished without a trace in one of the busiest malls in Los Angeles. Karen's world shrank to a single desperate hope that her son was alive, somewhere, waiting to come home. But as the months passed, that hope began to flicker. The days following Daniel's disappearance blurred into a relentless storm of chaos, grief, and unanswered questions. The Glendale Mall transformed from a place of laughter and families into a crime scene swarming with police officers, forensic teams, and reporters. Crime scene tape cordoned off the toy kiosk where Daniel was last seen, a silent testament to the nightmare unfolding. Karen White was thrust into the relentless glare of the media spotlight. Cameras captured every tear, every desperate plea for information. Flyers with Daniel's smiling face plastered every lamppost, every bulletin board, every storefront. Yet, despite the citywide search and the mounting public interest, no witnesses came forward. Detective Mark Ramirez led the investigation. A seasoned officer hardened by years of cases, he was determined to find answers, but even he admitted the circumstances were unusual. "There were people everywhere," Ramirez told Karen during one late-night meeting at the precinct, "but no one saw what happened. No one heard a cry, saw a suspicious person. Nothing." The mall's surveillance footage was grainy and incomplete. 1995 technology was limited. The cameras closest to the kiosk didn't capture Daniel slipping away. No strangers had been reported loitering in the area. It was as if the boy had vanished into thin air. Karen spent hours retracing her steps in the mall, questioning shoppers and employees, desperately trying to jog memories. But the vast crowd, the noise, the chaos, everyone seemed just as unaware and helpless as she was. The lack of eyewitnesses gnawed at her, twisting her thoughts into endless loops of what if. What if she had held his hand tighter? What if she hadn't turned to look at that display for a second? What if someone had seen something but was too afraid to speak? Detective Ramirez sympathized, but warned against speculation. "We'll follow every lead, Karen, but without witnesses or concrete evidence, it's like searching for a ghost." Weeks rolled into months. The investigation expanded, checking local hospitals, shelters, even out-of-state missing children reports. Daniel's name was added to national registries. Volunteers joined in search parties. Karen never gave up hope, attending support groups and speaking on television, her voice breaking but steady, as she implored the public for any clue. Yet the silence from the crowd was deafening. Rumors began to circulate, stories whispered in dark corners of abductions, trafficking rings, or worse. But no proof emerged. The media's initial frenzy faded, replaced by cold headlines noting the case as one more unsolved disappearance. For Karen, each day without Daniel was a slow erosion of hope. The world moved on, but she remained trapped in a limbo where her son's fate was an unbearable mystery. As the seasons changed and years slipped by, the world around Karen White seemed to move forward relentlessly. But for her, time froze in the moment Daniel vanished. The empty space where her son's laughter once filled their small apartment became a cavernous void that swallowed every joy, every hope. The first year was the hardest. Every morning, Karen woke with a jolt, half expecting to hear the patter of tiny feet or the creak of the front door as Daniel came home. Instead, she faced silence. She clung to every new lead like a lifeline. Calls from strangers claiming to have seen a boy matching Daniel's description sparked flickers of hope, only to dissolve into dead ends. Her phone became a constant companion, ringing with urgent messages or chilling silence. The media spotlight flickered now and then. Anniversaries of Daniel's disappearance, new police appeals, fundraising events, but the public's interest was fleeting. Karen attended countless missing children rallies, speaking on panels, sharing her story with other parents who understood the pain of waiting for a child who might never return. Her husband, James, tried to be her pillar, but grief strained their marriage. Sleepless nights and tearful days frayed their connection until they quietly separated, each coping with loss in solitude. Karen's life became a careful balance of survival and search. She volunteered with local organizations dedicated to missing children, channeling her anguish into advocacy, vowing to keep Daniel's name alive. Meanwhile, police files on Daniel's case grew dusty. Detective Ramirez, though still involved, had turned his attention to newer cases. The trail had gone cold, yet Karen refused to surrender. She studied every piece of evidence, every report, searching for patterns others missed. She kept a scrapbook of articles, police notes, and witness statements, filling its pages with desperate questions and fragile hopes. Years blurred together, birthdays passed without celebration, holidays without laughter. The world marked time, but Karen's heart remained suspended in 1995. Then, in the background of this long nightmare, a faint glimmer appeared. A strange, unexpected clue that would reignite the search and challenge everything Karen thought she knew about what happened to her son. It was 2009, 14 years after Daniel disappeared. The Glendale Police Department had long since closed the case officially, relegating it to their cold case files. Karen, however, never stopped searching, never stopped hoping. She continued scanning classifieds, following obscure leads, and attending community auctions whenever they offered the slightest chance of uncovering something new. One unassuming Saturday morning, an auction notice caught the attention of a local investigator helping Karen. A storage locker in a nearby facility had been abandoned, its contents unclaimed for months. The auction was standard procedure, nothing remarkable on the surface. When the locker was opened, its interior revealed a clutter of old VHS tapes, dusty boxes, and forgotten relics of a past era. Among the debris, something peculiar caught the investigator's eye. A Polaroid photo, yellowed at the edges but still vivid in its haunting subject. It was a picture of a young boy, his face grim and fearful, shackled with chains around his wrists. The boy's wide eyes stared directly at the camera, pleading silently for help. On the back of the photo, written in crayon, was a name, Daniel White. The date scrawled beneath it read, 1998. Karen was summoned immediately. The moment she saw the photograph, the years of torment and uncertainty erupted into a visceral wave of emotion. Here was her son, alive, 3 years after he had vanished. The discovery sent shockwaves through the small community and reignited the cold case. Police reopened the investigation with renewed urgency. The mystery deepened. Who had taken the photo? Why was Daniel in chains? And most hauntingly, who had rented that storage unit? Detective Ramirez, now assigned to the reopened case, described it as both a breakthrough and a new nightmare. The photo proved that Daniel had been alive years after his disappearance, but it also suggested a terrifying captivity that nobody had imagined. Karen's hope was rekindled, fierce and fragile. But with it came dread. The picture was a glimpse into a dark world she had only feared existed. The investigation expanded beyond the mall and the city's streets, probing into underground networks and shadowy figures. The rented storage locker was just the beginning of a deeper, more sinister puzzle. The photograph of Daniel in chains sent ripples through the investigation. It was a chilling artifact, a silent scream captured on instant film, frozen in time. The date on the back, 1998, was 3 years after Daniel vanished from the Glendale Mall. It shattered every assumption investigators had held about his disappearance. Detective Mark Ramirez pored over the photo, scrutinizing every detail. The boy's clothes, the style of the chains, even the faint background shapes, all became clues in a puzzle that grew darker with every passing hour. But the greatest mystery lay not in the photo itself, but in the storage locker where it was found. The locker facility's records showed a troubling gap. The name of the renter was missing, or perhaps deliberately erased. There were no payments logged after 2007, yet the unit was only auctioned off in 2009. Investigators questioned the storage facility staff. The manager, an older man named Frank, was cagey. "We handle hundreds of units," he shrugged. "Sometimes records get lost. It's not unusual." But the glint in his eye suggested otherwise, as if he knew more than he said. Karen clung to hope, but felt a growing chill. Who would hide a photo like that? Who could have kept her son captive, enough to take such a horrifying image? And why store it in a rented locker, only to abandon it years later? Police expanded their search to include surveillance footage from nearby streets dating back to the late 90s, tracing potential visitors to the facility. They also cross-referenced known criminals involved in child trafficking rings active in Los Angeles during that period. Journalists picked up the story, stirring public interest anew. But with attention came threats. Anonymous phone calls warning Karen to stop digging. The shadows surrounding Daniel's fate seemed darker than ever. Meanwhile, forensic experts analyzed the Polaroid film's chemical composition to verify the date, confirming it was likely taken around 1998. The handwriting on the back, crude and childish, added another layer of mystery. Was it Daniel's or someone else's attempt to identify the boy? As the investigation deepened, a name emerged from the margins of the case files, a man who had disappeared around the same time as Daniel, with suspected ties to underground criminal activity. But tracing this figure proved difficult. He had vanished without a trace. Karen's world became a tangled web of hope, fear, and relentless pursuit of truth. The photo was not just evidence, it was a haunting message, a clue buried in darkness, beckoning her to follow a trail she might not be prepared to face. The discovery of the photo cast a long shadow over the investigation, fueling a whirlwind of theories about Daniel's fate. Every new lead seemed to open a door to darker possibilities. Detective Ramirez and his team combed through decades-old reports, attempting to connect dots between the mysterious photo and known criminal networks. The man whose name had surfaced in the case was Vincent Cole, a low-profile figure with a history of arrests linked to child exploitation rings. He had vanished around the late 1990s, the same era as the date on the Polaroid. Some speculated that Cole had kidnapped Daniel, holding him captive for years before abandoning the storage locker and disappearing. Others wondered if the photo was a cruel message or proof of life sent by someone inside the underground network. Meanwhile, Karen faced mounting pressures from the media, from well-meaning strangers, and from her own spiraling emotions. Friends encouraged her to step back, to protect herself from heartbreak. But Karen refused. She knew Daniel was out there, and she would follow every thread until she found him. Journalists began investigating on their own, publishing exposés about trafficking rings operating under the radar in Los Angeles during the 90s. Some reports hinted at a secretive group trafficking children through storage units and abandoned buildings, places like the one where Daniel's photo was found. A young investigative journalist, Maya Patel, reached out to Karen, offering her help. Maya had a reputation for digging deep into cold cases and connecting with reluctant witnesses. Together, they began reviewing old evidence, interviewing former suspects, and searching for anyone who might have seen something years ago but had been too afraid to speak. As the investigation gained momentum, anonymous tips flooded in, some credible, others wild and conflicting. One caller claimed to have seen Daniel alive in a secluded compound outside the city. Another warned of corrupt officials protecting traffickers. Detective Ramirez warned Karen and Maya to tread carefully. The deeper they went, the more dangerous the path became. "These people don't want to be found," he said grimly, "and they're watching." The realization settled heavy in Karen's heart. The fight to find Daniel wasn't just about a lost child anymore. It was a battle against a hidden darkness lurking beneath the surface of the city she thought she knew. The search for answers began to unravel a tangled web that stretched far beyond a simple missing child case. Detective Ramirez, Karen, and journalist Maya Patel found themselves drawn into a labyrinth of secrets, lies, and long-buried horrors. Through persistent digging, Maya uncovered a series of abandoned storage units across Los Angeles, each linked to shadowy figures connected to the same criminal network. Some contained personal belongings of other missing children. Others held disturbing artifacts and clues that pointed to a sinister operation. Tracking the rental history of the locker where Daniel's photo was found proved a grueling challenge. The facility's records were incomplete, with key documents missing or intentionally destroyed. Investigators suspected an insider had helped cover tracks. Karen accompanied Maya on interviews with former associates of Vincent Cole, some of whom spoke under the condition of anonymity. They painted a chilling picture of a man who controlled a small but ruthless trafficking ring, using storage facilities as temporary holding cells. One witness described a place like a dungeon, hidden from the city's eyes, where children were kept in chains, moved between locations to avoid detection. The photo of Daniel fit exactly with this description. But just as hope grew, so did the danger. Maya received anonymous threats warning her to cease her investigation. Her car was vandalized. Someone was watching their movements. Detective Ramirez increased surveillance on known suspects, but the deeper they probed, the more they realized how deeply entrenched the network was, possibly with corrupt officials aiding their escape. Karen wrestled with fear and determination. Every step forward risked confrontation with people who thrived in darkness. Yet she refused to be silenced. For Daniel, she would face whatever horrors awaited. A breakthrough came when a former low-level member of the trafficking ring agreed to talk in exchange for protection. His testimony hinted at a hidden location where Daniel might have been kept years after the photo was taken. The investigation was far from over, but the path was finally becoming clearer. Behind the shadows lurked answers, painful, terrifying, but vital. The testimony from the former trafficker opened a door that no one had expected. Under the promise of protection and anonymity, he described a remote warehouse on the outskirts of Los Angeles, a forgotten industrial site that had been repurposed as a holding area for kidnapped children. "It wasn't a place you'd notice," he said quietly during the interview. "No signs, no lights at night, just a cold, empty building where they kept the kids chained up. That's where Daniel was, at least for a while." Detective Ramirez mobilized a small task force to investigate the warehouse. With search warrants and backup, the team descended on the site under the cover of darkness, hoping to uncover evidence that would finally confirm Daniel's fate. Inside, they found a chilling scene: rusted chains bolted to the walls, makeshift cages constructed from scrap metal, and remnants of children's belongings scattered across the floor. The air was thick with dust and the weight of years-long silence. Although Daniel was nowhere to be found, the discovery confirmed the traffickers' horrifying methods and proved that the underground network was real, not just rumors or urban legends. Karen's heart pounded as she walked through the warehouse, each step heavy with the ghosts of her son's suffering. The photo of Daniel in chains suddenly made unbearable sense. Forensic teams combed the building for DNA, fingerprints, and anything that might identify who had been there, or possibly still was. Meanwhile, Maya Patel's reporting brought public attention back to the case. The city rallied with renewed vigor, pushing officials to allocate more resources toward dismantling the trafficking network. But the deeper the investigation went, the more dangerous it became. Karen received direct threats, ominous warnings that she should stop looking. Yet she pressed on, driven by a fierce mother's love and an unyielding hope that Daniel might still be alive. The pieces were finally coming together, but the full truth remained just out of reach, buried in shadows that refused to yield. The investigation reached a crescendo, with new leads from the warehouse discovery and the former trafficker's testimony. Detective Ramirez and his team zeroed in on a suspect, Vincent Cole, the elusive man who had vanished in the late 90s but now reemerged as the central figure in a sprawling child trafficking ring. Surveillance and informants finally placed Cole at a secluded compound outside Los Angeles, a fortress disguised as an abandoned farm. With a coordinated raid involving local and federal authorities, the operation was set in motion. The tension was unbearable as Karen waited anxiously at a nearby command center, surrounded by officers and journalists. The hours stretched long and uncertain. When the team returned, their faces were grim but determined. Among the rescued children was a boy who matched Daniel's description, now 15 years old, thinner, haunted by years of captivity, but alive. The reunion was bittersweet. Karen held Daniel close, tears streaming as the weight of years collapsed into a moment of fragile hope. Daniel's memories were fragmented, years lost in darkness, faces blurred, moments of terror and kindness mixed together in a confusing haze. But he remembered the photo, the chains, and the desperate longing to escape. The compound was dismantled, and arrests followed. Evidence collected exposed a network reaching far beyond Los Angeles, implicating others who would soon face justice. Yet the story didn't end there. Months later, Karen found a letter among Daniel's belongings, an old crumpled Polaroid taped inside. It was a self-portrait drawn by a child's hand, with Daniel's name written in crayon. But the date on the back was from 2002, 4 years after the original photo. Who had taken it? Why had it never surfaced? And what else remained hidden in the shadows? The mystery had given way to hope and reunion, but some questions lingered, echoes of a darkness still waiting to be fully uncovered. Karen knew one thing for sure. She would never stop fighting for the truth, for Daniel, and for every child still lost in the shadows.